just give the location. So we're parked, here we are parked at the bottom of Colbert Street, and this is the entrance to the Blue-Green Trail. And Neil is going to give us a tour along the trail.
Sure.
Talk about, what are you going to talk about?
Well, I don't know. What do you want me to talk about?
Well, you talk about whatever you want to talk about, but the trees that are of interest to you.
Yeah. I think the larger context of what, for me, for this stretch of forest, we live just up on Country Lane, so just up on the nice hill overlooking this landscape. Through my work, I get to go into some of the oldest, most amazing forests in the eastern United States and other parts of the world in the last 10, 15 years. And so when I first moved here and we took a short family hike and our kids were really small, so we didn't go far, I looked around and I went, this is cut over. Eh. And that's just my snobby tendency about some things, about apples and about trees. And so when the pandemic hit, I started walking this regularly, 3 to 5 days a week probably, just down in and up towards Acton, towards the Acton boundary. And I started paying attention, and I found this to be a very interesting forest. And the bigger picture is that, this is a forest that has been what I would say is beat up over the last 3 centuries. And most recently, we're going to walk through an area that I learned about some time ago was a mink farm into the 60s.
Didn't know that.
So I assume you need trees, but you're still managing the forest in ways that it's being managed now, which is benign neglect mostly. So it's got a long history of disturbance from European colonists. Mm-hmm. And but what really surprised me during the pandemic is we were going to go for a hike from this point in, and then the pandemic hit, so we shut down. So Brett Matheson and I filmed a series of short videos where I just was introducing people to the trees. And to my surprise, there's over 31 tree and shrub species right along the trail in the next 3/4 of a mile.
Native trees.
Native trees. Yeah. And I'm not always the best botanist, and I wasn't going far off trail to look for some more. This is just what I saw basically from the trail. Right. And it shouldn't have surprised me, but it did surprise me. For one more larger step back context of where we are in North America. So in North America, there's different forest types from Florida up into Canada. We are sitting at the boundary, we are sitting firmly in the boundary between what I like to call the southern temperate forest, but some people call it the oak hickory forest, and the northern hardwood forest. So the northern hardwood forest classically in our minds is sugar maple, American beech, and yellow birch, with some paper birch and some conifers, red spruce, hemlock. Yeah. The southern temperate forest is, I don't like to call it oak hickory anymore because that sells it a little short. I love oaks. Who doesn't love oaks? Everyone loves oaks. And hickory just comes along with oaks for some reason, but I think that's a little bit of a slight myth. Because the southern temperate forest is home to anywhere between 60 to 100 tree species, depending on where you are.
And the southern range goes down to where?
The southern temperate forest, it grades into the mixed mesophytic forest in the southern Appalachians, but I would still call that kind of a southern temperate forest in my mind. I use broader classifications, and I don't want to be species specific because I think that sometimes can get us into trouble in management and expectations. But that goes all the way down to the Smokies and almost down to the Piedmont. The flat area that was cleared when Europeans colonized for agriculture. So and that's a southern temperate, but then once you get down to like peninsular Florida, you start getting into subtropical forests.
Okay.
So within the broad southern temperate forest that I speak of, there's many different forest types and ecosystems, but here we're not at a northern range limit, but we're near a range margin for the north. So we'll see southern species, it's not right here, but like swamp white oak is along this trail. I think we have 3 types of hickories that I in my mind. White oak goes farther north, but it's really restricted when it goes farther north. It goes up into the Champlain Valley and the Connecticut River Valley, and that goes up along the coast. So there are what we would think of as common species in this area, but they're really at a northern end of their distribution. So right here in Maynard, we're really firmly in that mix, in that they call it a forest ecotone. So where it transitions from one ecosystem to another type. Yeah. And you could see this best on Summer Hill.
Yes, I remember you saying that. Yeah.
Yeah, I love Summer Hill because on the south-facing slopes, it's firmly oak hickory, white oak. What's really interesting, it has mockernut hickory, which is a pretty southern species, but it's on the south-facing slopes. And then you go up over, you go to the north side of the Summer Hill, and you've got yellow birch. I think there's some maple, but it turns into a forest that you would expect up in the Whites or the Adirondacks.
Right.
And so we have all that here in Maynard.
Yes.
And so this little trail along the river, so we pick up some species that are more common in river systems or along river systems. You have all that mixed into this little
that's pretty incredible
strip of forest that has a sad history over the last 300 years in some ways. You know, I mean, we cut our forest. European colonists cut the forest hard.
So, I have a question. When you say that there's like roughly 31 native species, like how many, maybe this is not like an analogous, but like how many native species would you see typically in like a very healthy forest or versus like a not healthy forest? Like is 31 seems like a good number?
That's a lot.
Okay.
I think that's a pretty good number for, again, I haven't measured it out, but is it 3/4 of a mile to the water treatment plant? Maybe. That's pretty high density of species.
Okay.
I'm running a project where we put in plots from Maine to southern tip of New Jersey to Ohio through Pennsylvania, and we put in plots that are a little bigger than this parking lot, this end of the parking lot, a decent bit bigger than this, and we only get 7 to 11 species in an area like this.
Okay.
And so, you know, that's not the same as running a 3/4 mile transect, but 31 species is a lot. I can't think of too many forests that we sampled. Maybe that one in New Jersey, which was really diverse, that would be as in that number. Maybe the Ohio one. We are also only sampling old growth forests, and people like to say a lot there's more diversity in old growth forests, and I don't know that that's absolutely true. It might be in some situations. So part of your question for me is also, given the history of this forest is only maybe 120 years old, which I know that a lot of people think that's old. That's longer than most humans live, or all humans that we know of. But in my mind, it's a baby forest. It's not even quite middle age yet. I would say it's, you know, in human terms, this is a 30 to 45-year-old forest. In human terms, in human years, if you want to say it that way.
Yeah.
And so when forests get disturbed, there are some species that come in that don't survive 200 years development at the same level. Like an old growth forest in Maine will have paper birch, but if we had a big disturbance here and let's say a paper birch got established following big disturbance, I don't expect it to be an important species in 200 years.
Okay.
That it would start to fade. It needs big gaps to survive. And depending on how we manage our forest, this is generally a closed canopy forest. It's a dense forest. And so there are some species that just can't come up in that shade as well as others.
Right. So it's become precious to you over the time.
Has.
It's very nice.
It
Yeah.
has. And the surprising thing was the plant species, but as I kept hiking, coyotes are normal around here, but I saw coyote 1 or 2. I see, especially in the winter, I see kills along the trail, so the animals are doing what animals do, what people do. And but I've seen pileated woodpeckers through here a lot. Maybe their population is coming from the Assabet Wildlife Refuge. Yeah. But the trees here are mature enough that they could be some habitat for the largest woodpecker in the Western Hemisphere.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really cool.
Yeah.
But a few years ago, 2 years ago or so, I saw a fisher 20 to 30 feet up into the tree, and I just stopped and paused, and it came down and it lumbered around, and then it kind of looked and saw me, and then it kind of sped up and went in a different direction. But a fisher is one of the more important predators in this landscape.
Yeah.
They're living here in an old mill town.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh.
In this river.
Right.
Yeah. I've not seen the river otters yet, but they're here. So the eagles fly and fish through here in the wintertime. The great blue heron, maybe we'll see one. I call them steady, that they're always in this one spot. I don't know it's the same one. But pretty much all the animals that we could expect. Bears come through the golf course. I'm sure they're using this habitat.
Okay.
Yeah, someone spotted a bear this year over by the golf course. I can't think of other animals
There'll
we're
be some
missing.
bobcats because we have bobcats on Durant.
So that's probably the river system brings in a lot of animals.
Yeah.
So this little strip of woods, and we're in a dense, semi-dense, not that dense, but for me, I grew up in the country. Little neighborhood up on top of the hill, and there's another one adjacent to it that's similarly dense, and all these animals are here with us. Yeah. I have a video of a fisher cat in my neighbor's backyard killing a possum.
Oh, wow.
And it was just a month or 2 ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the coyote, a mother, put a den in on the edge of this habitat, and again in the same spot in my neighbor's backyard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're here living with us. And most people wouldn't know that, but me going, at least for myself personally, going out, I saw these things.
Yeah.
And I'm not going out early. I'm going out at 7 or 8 in the morning.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not going early.
Yeah.
So it's really grown on me. The tree diversity was one thing. There's some flora that's interesting in there, but I'm not really great with flora.
Let's walk a little bit.
Yeah. Sorry.
That's great.
No, it's fantastic.
But of course we have exotic species we have to deal with, like, the knotweed right here.
That's right. Yeah. So so I'd love you to talk a little bit about the sort of management that you would like to see if we had the money and the full-time conservation agent, etc., to do it.
That's really interesting. We're having a big discussion in the natural resources community, the forestry community, and this is coming under the Biden executive order on mature and old-growth forests. There's a re-emphasis on the value of old-growth forests and mature forests, and how are we going to manage our forests moving into the future, because there's a stronger realization that we didn't do it too well 200 years ago or so. Sorry, I'm just checking out this tree because I'm trying to figure out what it is. And so the exciting thing about this conversation is we are talking about incorporating, partnering with indigenous people to steward the forest, using a blend of Western science and indigenous knowledge and stewardship and understanding. I think that won't happen for probably another generation, just how human institutions move. So that's a long way of saying that the way I've been brought up as a scientist, I guess I'd say, from my student years on, is, you know, we used to have this notion of wilderness, which meant there was no one in the forest, and that's wrong. That's very wrong in a lot of ways. You know, I've been really lucky to be in some of the different, most incredible forests in the world. I've seen essentially the northernmost trees on Earth.
Yeah.
And what I saw there really shocked me at first, and then I saw a small clear cut, very small, you know, maybe 30, 40 feet in diameter, maybe a little bit bigger. And I was like, why are they cutting the forest up here? This is old growth, wilderness, blah, 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 you know, with my Western forestry mindset. And that was wrong. And then I paused for a second and I thought, oh, there's no sun for 6 months. It's really cold up here. We're at 72 degrees latitude, north latitude. Yeah, they need timber. They need wood for fuel and for heat and for all. And I was like, well, yeah, of course. Mm-hmm. You know, but it took that to start to break my mind from this wilderness idea. But I still have it in me a little bit. You know, like, I think sometimes forests on their own are kind of okay.
Yeah, lots of questions about that.
But I would say we could maybe manage this a little bit differently. Part of my hesitation in some ways of managing everything comes down to resources, actually. Like, there's exotic species in this understory, and
buckthorn.
Yeah, right. There's buckthorn in here. There's knotweed is a little farther into the forest than I remember, and there's multiflora rose. There's some big patches up over this way, right? We don't necessarily want those in our ecosystem because they crowd out other species and habitat. But do we have the time and energy to take care of all of this? And what I mean is the time and energy that would be used to this, could it be used for creating more green spaces? You know, there's a really provocative book, and that one changed my mind nicely as well. And I can't remember the author's name, but it's called Rambunctious Garden. And the author, she puts forth the idea that there is no ecosystem that's always quite been there. And humans have always changed ecosystems. I mean, like beavers do, like elephants do. You know, we're just another animal sometimes. And then she went around the world and looked at ecosystems that had exotic species coming in. And some people were like, you know, the species isn't that bad. The species isn't from here, but it's doing some good things. It's keeping the soil intact. It's providing habitat for this. And she just made a strong case that our ecosystems have always, from a Western position, been messy. And they're going to continue to get messy right now. We're not going back in that trajectory right now because of the species we lost, right? There's American chestnut saplings on this bank. 200, 300 years ago, there would be American chestnut that would be this big.
Yeah.
That would be natural.
Yeah.
But they're gone. I haven't seen any hemlock, but there probably are a few hemlock, but they're just about gone. It'll be hard to see given now that the leaves are gone, but ash is on the way out, and beech leaf disease is in here. So there's a beautiful American beech, and I just checked on it.
So the hemlock's gone because of
hemlock lilidelgid.
Okay, so that's right.
Is that a fungus?
It's a little insect that basically attaches to the base of the leaf of eastern hemlock, and it basically drains the tree of its energy.
Okay.
And in warmer environments, that happens in 2 or 3 years. In cooler environments up here, it's been ongoing for 20 years, and some trees survive and some don't.
So some of them aren't going to survive, you think?
Yeah. When I first moved here in school woods, I was really surprised to see hemlock without hemlock lilidelgid. So hemlock is not a common species around here, so we're also thinking it's kind of an isolated population. So somehow maybe they're escaping hemlock woolly delgid, but it'll get here. And then there's a big American beech 3/4 of a mile down the trail or so. One of my favorite trees on this trail, and it's finally got beech leaf disease.
Okay.
So in about 2 years or less, it'll be done.
And the ash and the chestnut, it's the pathogens also.
Yeah, it's all pathogens coming in from our economic trade mostly. Initially, it was scientists and other folks bringing in exotic pests like spongy moth, which used to be called gypsy moth. But now it's really economic trade and not checking pallets. It's really almost that. It's not quite that simple, but it's pretty close. Pallets and nursery trade,
Right.
where a lot of diseases
Yeah,
coming in.
yeah.
So our forest is, from a classical vegetation definition, it's going to become messy because we're losing major species, and we have buckthorn and knotweed, but we'll have Norway maple in this area, so Norway maple might come into this forest, and so we're seeing a great transition. And so how do we manage that?
Yes. What are your thoughts about that?
I am now of the feeling that we live with it in the near term, because we, not just humans, we and other animals and plants will probably do much better when we have more green spaces. You know?
You mean, what do you mean by green spaces?
Parks and natural areas like this one.
Right.
You know, I don't know how much green space there is to expand in Maynard with such a tight, dense population, but as a society as a whole, more forests will be better for us. And, you know, I guess you could do studies on that, and then there are studies about the health impacts, the positive health impacts about trees and neighborhoods and cities.
Yeah.
But think about what happened during the pandemic.
Yeah, people started walking.
People in this forest, someone at the other end of this trail started raking it because their dog was slipping on the leaves. That's what he said. I don't know if I believe that. But people came out here and started modifying this trail because they were coming out here so much.
Yeah.
Wow.
People went to the forest.
Yeah.
And so that's a really big indication to me without study that we value it, even though we are more of a internet, TV, go to the city species.
Yes.
We still love the forest.
Yeah.
And so